What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/TalesFromTheCustomer. Alright, this story's called Taxi Driver Broke My Electric Wheelchair but Refused to Give Me Any Details So I Could Make a Claim on My Wheelchair Insurance. Yesterday was a long day for me. Every week I have to take my youngest son on a 100-mile, 4-hour train journey to his dad's. Usually we stay at my mom's house for a few days while I take him to school, and then I do the return journey on Tuesday. But I am chronically ill, and the second wave of Rona just hit the UK, and mom's local area has really high numbers, so I decided I would just go straight back home. In total, I was traveling for around 10 hours once you add in waiting for buses, taxis, and trains. Why were taxis involved? Well, usually I just go from train station A to station B to station C to station D, but unfortunately there is maintenance work between A and B, so I would have to take a detour through Station X. But Station X has no wheelchair access, so instead the train company were lovely, and they offered me free taxis to and from A and B. On the way to my son's father's house, it all went smoothly, but the journey back, I had a big problem. I was getting into the taxi to go from B to A, and the car had wheelchair restraints that had large metal clamps attached. These clamps were in the way of the ramp, and I asked the driver to move them as I knew they would hit the bottom of my chair. The driver insisted.
No, I run many wheelchairs in this car. It'll be fine.
I was exhausted and just wanted to get home, so I drove up the ramp and, as predicted, I hit the clamps. And all of a sudden, my wheelchair wouldn't move and wouldn't turn on. I told the driver, "Something's happened to my battery. My chair isn't working. This is why I didn't want to drive over the clamps."
It'll be fine. We'll fix it at the end of the journey.
He then shut the door without attaching any restraints to my wheelchair. He asked if I wanted a seatbelt, but I declined as there was no point if my wheelchair wasn't restricted. All a seatbelt would do is strangle me when the car turned corners or put on the brakes, as my chair was sliding all over the place. I'm 5'2" and I had to crouch the entire 1.5-hour drive because there was no headroom at all, and no way to get into a seat in the car from the wheelchair space. I kept headbutting the ceiling every time he hit the brakes, as there was a low bit of ceiling at the back. Honestly, this taxi was not designed for wheelchairs. It looked like the guy had just rigged his boot with a ramp. Anyway, we get to the last train station and my chair is not switching on. The taxi driver helped me climb out of the car, thank God I'm not paralyzed, and pulled my wheelchair out. I told him where to grab it, and specifically not to grab the handle on the back as that would take the back wheels off. So what does he do? Grabs the bloody handle and yanks the chair body off the back wheels. Then he made me pick up the very heavy back wheels and bring them out of the car, while he drags my poor chair on just its front casters. We put the wheels back on and try to find the damage. We found that a piece of battery was missing and was not in the car or in my chair. This is where the driver tried to leave me there.
Oh well, you'll have to call someone to pick you up.
Me, near tears. I can't. My phone is dead and I can't go anywhere to get help because I can't walk far.
Well, what would you like me to do about it? I need to get back.
At minimum, I expect you to take me home. You can't just leave me here stranded. He reluctantly took me home and knocked on my door to get my husband, but he refused to give me any details for my insurance. When we got in the house, my husband looked at the chair properly and realized that the clamps had ripped off some of the wiring out from underneath. So it's going to be an expensive job to fix, and I'm currently stuck without a wheelchair. I don't even think my insurance will cover it as I wasn't the one who damaged it, and I only have the registration plate number of the taxi, which I thankfully memorized while waiting for my husband. The driver refused to let us take pictures of the clamps or his registration plate number. I am so angry and upset, and now stuck in the house again for who knows how long. That's an odd time for kisses. But, that just sounds like a really frustrating situation to have dealt with. I'm curious here, does she have a chance to get this all comped for her? Because that's ridiculous and obviously not her fault. Alrighty, this story's called Why I Boycotted a Store for Nearly 10 Years. Okay, even if it wasn't a rule in this sub to keep things anonymous, I would do it. In no way, shape, or form do I believe that the series of events that happened at this one location was the company's fault. And I say that because when the company got word of the shady crap going down in this location, they closed the location down, fired everyone who worked there, and hired a brand new crew that, according to one of the employees I know, had to go through 4 mandatory classes on appropriate customer interaction before even stepping foot on the floor. And I did not think this was their fault at the time. Every time I was at a sister store in another city, any other city, I only interacted with people who were polite, courteous, and the locations were always clean, so I didn't boycott them. Just the one closest to me, because this was the one giving grief. And it's a small town. Word gets around. I seriously doubt I was the only one boycotting them by the end of it. To give a little necessary background information, this store had been built beside a small mall that had about 15 stores. These days it has 2. This took place in 2002 when phone books and public phones were still a thing, but dying as cell phones became popular. And there were stores that still had paper applications that had to be picked up in person and turned in. Now, these events all happened within a few months of each other, but the last one is the main reason I decided to boycott our local store of this national chain. First incident. I was looking for the stuff I needed for a school project. It was crafty. I couldn't find the craft section, so I found someone in the store uniform. Uniform was a colored polo, khaki pants, and a name tag with the store logo on it. So yes, I got an employee and not another customer, and politely asked where the craft section was. Employee said, "Why the hell would I know that?" Another employee heard this and came up to ask what was going on, and the first employee said, "Stupid chick's lost. She thought this was a craft store." Second employee started laughing. I left without purchasing anything. Second incident. 3 months later, I was looking for a job. I'd gotten an application to the store. Actually, I got applications from every store that would give me one, filled it out, and returned it to the store. I didn't want to work there, but I wouldn't have turned down a job either. I handed the application over the customer service desk, where it was supposed to be turned in, and employee behind the desk looked it over, looked me in the eyes, and threw the application away. I didn't say anything because I didn't have much of a spine at the time, so I just left. Third incident. My grandma had taken her dog to the vet to get spayed. I was at home in case the vet needed to call. None of us had cell phones. I had the phone book with me, and I had the pages of all the stores they were going to go to bookmarked. Shortly after surgery began, the vet called. During the process of the procedure, she discovered the dog had several tiny tumors, but couldn't remove them without my grandmother's permission. Cue me desperately calling every store I could think of to explain the situation and ask them to page my family. I couldn't just give permission myself. Both our family and grandma were on very limited incomes at the time, and I didn't know if she could afford the increase in surgery, which is why I had to contact her first. In one of the stores of the mall, they said it was against policy to page a customer to a phone call and wished me luck finding them at another store. Every other store paged them. Nothing. Then I called the store I ended up boycotting. I explained the situation to the employee on the phone, who laughed at me and hung up. Where were mom and grandma at that store? See, they had decided that it would be easier for me to reach them if they had stayed in one place. Needless to say, I didn't reach them in time. The dog was sewn back up, and Grandma couldn't afford an operation to go back and get the tumors removed. For 10 years, we watched that dog get attacked, slowly, by cancer. By the end, she was carrying a tumor that was almost as big as she was. And that was when we had to put her down. May the pup rest in peace. I did not forgive them. From the day they laughed at me and hung up to the day that dog was put to sleep, I did not spend a cent in that store, and I encouraged anyone who would listen to follow my boycott. Today's the anniversary of Little Sissy's death, and this came to mind. Thank you for reading my vent. Okay, that is actually baffling. Like, I am astounded that anyone would think that it's okay to act like that towards a customer. And it's not even just freaking one person. Like, every employee they encountered was a dead jerk. Man, I almost slipped up there. Anyway, I want in the comments, rest in peace, Sissy. Because that dog didn't deserve to die that way. This story's called, But the Owner Invited Us. So this actually happened a few years ago. My daughter reminded me about it recently. I have friends that we'll call Joe and Donna. Joe and Donna are old school country folk with old-fashioned down-home values. They are not poor, but save money and are frugal, but not cheap. So Joe and Donna were heading home one night on a lonely bit of highway in the middle of nowhere when they see a car on the side of the road and stop to offer assistance. Joe is a bit of a shade tree mechanic and takes a look, and the car had a cracked radiator hose and had overheated. While patching it up, they started yakking about this and that. Joe and Donna were celebrating their 25th anniversary in a few days and were excited about going into town and eating at their favorite restaurant, a certain Colored Lobster. Their new friend explains that he was in town to check on a restaurant he owned and would love to host their anniversary dinner as a thank you. Joe and Donna try to decline, but the guy isn't having it. He asks them to meet him tomorrow night at the restaurant at 6 p.m. and gives them his card. Joe and Donna go home and tell the story to her daughter, who looks at the card and realizes that the guy was a famous actor who co-owned a very expensive restaurant downtown. Joe and Donna don't want to take advantage and were tempted to not go when their daughter threatened them with anything and everything she could. Joe and Donna dress up in their country folk finest and hop in their truck. Now, their truck purrs like a kitten, but had been around. It was at least 10 years old and had been used as a truck should, but was kept clean. They pull up in front of Fancy Smancy and a valet comes to open the truck door, hands them a ticket, and everything seems fine. They walk in the restaurant, and this is where things get interesting. They walk up to the host stand, and the host tells them that they only accept applications on certain days and that they were currently fully staffed. Joe and Donna are confused and explain to the host that they were here for dinner. The host makes a point to look them up and down and then asks if they realize dinner is minimum $100 per person. Joe pulls the card out and hands it to the host, attempting to explain that he was invited by the owner. The host laughs and says something like, "I don't know how you got this, but you are not welcome here and need to leave before I call the police." Joe and Donna didn't want to cause a scene and decide to go. While they are waiting at valet, the owner shows up and asks if they enjoyed dinner and apologized for running late. Joe and Donna don't want to get anyone in trouble and try to mumble some excuse, but the owner realized this wasn't the same bubbly, friendly couple from last night and knows something is up. He calls bullcrap and escorts them in for dinner. The host looks shocked to see them back, but doesn't say anything in front of the owner, who personally seats them before disappearing. Joe and Donna ordered drinks, but said they felt so out of place they just really wanted to leave. Soon the owner returns and asks the couple what happened. Not wanting to get anyone in trouble, they tried to explain it was a simple misunderstanding, but he had already gone to review the CCTV. Turns out, one of the valets had seen their truck and had come in to warn the host because everyone knew the owner was due in and had been told to make the best possible impression. The owner asked for the valet and the host. He asked them both about the incident and warned them he'd already watched the tapes. Amid a hail of excuses and apologies, the owner asked them if they would treat his parents that way. Never called them his parents, but kinda implies it. Joe and Donna are shocked, but play along with their precious little boy, going over the top and having a blast. Dinner is saved, and Joe and Donna end up having the time of their lives, being fawned over by the staff and acting out with their son. The owner ends up becoming fast friends with Joe and Donna and invite them to dinner whenever he's in town. They were finally able to return the favor and had him over for dinner, which almost gave their daughter a heart attack. As for the valet and host, neither were fired. Joe and Donna insisted, but the owner made the entire restaurant undergo retraining and warned he'd better never have similar complaints from other relatives in the area, leaving them to always treat customers like family. That is such a sweet story, oh my god. Okay, but who's the famous guy? Now, in the comments, there's this guy that says, "Owner sounds like a genuine guy. I hope he's someone well known for being nice." And OP says, "He is. If I named him, you'd be like, ah." So we've narrowed it down to a male celebrity who owns a restaurant and he's well known for being nice and he's pretty famous. Let's try to figure out who this guy is so we can appreciate him more. Alright, last up is called My Awesome Dentist. Been going to this guy for years. In all that time, got one filling and just the regular cleanings. But a few months ago, one of my teeth became loose and it needed to go and have a bridge put in. Of course, the virus has me on reduced hours and it's going to hurt to pay for this, but it must be done so I can eat normally again. The office manager knows I'm on reduced hours because I offered to have my appointments at midday rather than early and late like most working people request, figuring someone else would need that precious time slot more than I did. They did appreciate that. So the day of the procedure, everything went fine. Back to the office manager to set up a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks. I ask how much I owe. She says, "You know, it'll be easier for me to take care of it at your follow-up." I did appreciate that. Yesterday was my follow-up. Just a quick look from the dentist says the healing is just fine. Let's look again in a month. Set up my next appointment. Office manager writes it down and says, "Have a nice day." I say, "I think I owe you some money." She says, "You'll be coming back next month. We can do it then if you'd like." I accepted. I know she's just stretching it out to help me since I'm on reduced work hours, but didn't embarrass me by saying it out loud. They are A1 people. So wholesome today! Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.